All right, guys, it's Tuesday for Tuesday Talks. We're live, I guess. That's what the little red box on my computer screen tells me. Let me get this blog over here for you guys. Wish it would let me comment early because then I could put the blog in there. And there it is. Okay, so we're pinning that bad boy. There she is. Okay, so for those of you who are joining me for the very first time or don't know me, my name is Sunny Brigham. I'm a board-certified clinical and integrative nutritionist, and I help individuals reduce their fatigue, reduce their bloat, and lose some weight, all by solving their digestive problems. So most people have digestive problems and they don't really know it, just like most of my clients have bloat and they don't really know it until we get the bloat to go away. And then they realize, wow, I was bloated. And then when it comes back, then they really notice it. So that is what we are chatting about tonight. I have a little dog down here that wants me to throw the ball. Oh, hold. Okay, go on, buddy. Okay, one time. All right. Okay, so tonight, like I said, is all about bloat. I am live streaming, I guess that's what we call it, from my computer. I usually do this from my phone. Last week I tried it from my computer. I thought it went pretty swell. So I'm going to try it again from the computer. So if you have any comments during the broadcast, go ahead and type them in, and I should see them pop up on the computer, and I will be more than happy to answer them as we go along. Okay, so let's chat bloat. Something's blinking at me and this doesn't look right. I guess maybe I am blind. Am I blind? I'm live. Okay. In case you didn't notice, I talk to myself. I talk myself through things. It helps me kind of cope a little bit better. I'm sure I'm not the only one that does that. Maybe I'm the only one that'll admit it publicly. Okay, so bloat. Yeah. So there's really like two types of bloat. So we have acute bloating and chronic bloating. So acute bloating happens to just about everybody. At some point in everybody's life, they become bloated. If you do not have chronic bloat and you feel that you are bloated, you will notice it right away. Bloating for some people means that their stomach becomes very distended, very, large. And then some people, their stomach doesn't even become distended at all, but it feels that way. When they push on it, they feel like their stomach is just rock hard and it's not abs of steel under there. It's very uncomfortable. It's almost the same feeling that you get if you were to eat a holiday meal and completely stuff yourself, and that feeling you get at the end where you're just like, oh, and you have to like unbutton your pants, and all you want to do is just relax on the couch and not sit upright and not lay down because both of those hurt. So you just need to kind of relax a little bit. So that is really what bloating feels like. And we get bloating for a variety of reasons. If it's an acute series of bloating, meaning that it's just something that happens on occasion, you never really know when it's going to strike, it's usually because we have eaten too quickly or we have eaten too much. And so, if you think about the holiday meal scenario that I just gave you, but if we eat and we eat too quickly, when we're eating, and we're nobody, when we're eating, we're taking in big gulps of air as we bite our food. I'm picturing a hamburger in my hands, but I don't even eat those, so I'm not even certain why. But if you are, if you're eating food and you're taking large bites or you're eating super fast, you're going to take in large gulps of air while you are consuming that food. And so when we get the air, it gets down in the belly, and sometimes it causes bloating that way. Acute bloating will typically go away within a few hours on its own, and it's really nothing to be concerned about. It just happens from time to time, and like I said, it's usually because you ate too fast or you ate too much. Chronic bloating is what we're going to talk about tonight. We're going to talk about why we get chronic bloating, how to pick out the signs and symptoms that you have chronic bloating, typically where chronic bloating comes from, and some immediate things that you can do to reduce the bloating and things that you need to address long-term to help reduce the bloating. And I happen to be drinking one of my remedies for tonight. This was in my last week's blog. This is my ginger lemon tea that I love so much because it helps with bloating. It helps with gastroparesis as well, which we'll talk about tonight. Okay. So some of the signs and symptoms that you have chronic bloating, like we talked about, is the distended stomach, the pressure, the feeling like you're gaining weight, but if you step on the scale, you're not really gaining any weight at all. And it's usually the distended belly and the pressure. The pressure is the biggest thing, and that's the most uncomfortable thing. When I get bloated, because I do have IBS, I don't get the distended belly. What I get is massive amounts of pressure in my abdomen, and it hurts so incredibly bad. So I really try to avoid it at all costs. And things that typically cause bloating is one of the biggest things that I see is, if we talk about intestinal disorders, we're talking about IBS, whether it's IBS-D, which is IBS diarrhea, or IBS-C, which is IBS constipation. IBD, it's just irritable bowel disease. So you can have ulcerative colitis, you can have Crohn's disease. All of those are going to cause any type of bloating. So any disorder with your intestines comes with the lovely bloat. Displaced or inadequate microbes. So we all have a good amount of good bacteria in the intestines. We also have a good amount of bad bacteria. And we want to have, it's a very fine balance between the two. And sometimes if we have more bad bacteria than good, that can cause some bloating. And if we get displaced bacteria, so if we have bad bacteria in the large intestine and it kind of creeps its way up into the small intestine, that develops into something called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, something you absolutely don't want, but that comes with significant bloating as well. The other issue that I see is gastroparesis, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. This is also something that I have, another unfun condition, and it's basically just slow emptying of the stomach. So lack of enzymes will do it. Just our stomach is just not emptying at the rate that it should be, and so the food typically will sit there longer than it should, and it'll start to ferment a little bit and then create some gas, and that causes some bloating as well. And there's some things that you can do for that. Hey, I'm sorry, my little guy wants to play with ball tonight. Nobody. No, sir. We'll play afterwards. His cute little whining is distracting me, and it makes me sad. Okay, and then the last reason that we typically see bloating, and this is a big one, is continued intake of foods that our body doesn't agree with. Most people have a food sensitivity. Most people have multiple food sensitivities, and we don't necessarily know it right away. When I have people come into my office and they tell me that maybe they're bloated on occasion, or they're not using the bathroom regularly, and then I start digging and asking a bunch of questions. Come to find out, the bloating is pretty significant. It happens fairly often, specifically right after food. So if you eat something and within an hour or two you feel that you're bloated, that's a good indication that you're eating something that your body doesn't necessarily agree with. It can be a little difficult pinpointing what particular food that is. But once we find the offending food and remove it from the diet, the bloat will subside pretty quickly. So those are the 4 main reasons that we see bloat. There are 100 other reasons, but these are the top 4 that I see in my clinical practice. So it's intestinal disorders such as IBS, IBD, displaced or imbalanced microbiota, so bad bacteria more than good bacteria, or bad bacteria in the bad and in spots of the intestines that we don't want it in. Gastroparesis, or continued intake of foods that our body doesn't necessarily agree with. Okay, so in the intermediate, there's a couple of things that we can do to reduce bloating. One, which is a fairly common and popular one, is peppermint. So sometimes we'll get bloating if we're having too many contractions in the intestines as the food moves through it. It's creating more gas than our body wants, and so we'll get a little bloating that way. Peppermint can actually calm down the contractions in the intestines and allow for the food to move through slowly. And so a lot of people find that drinking peppermint tea after a meal, or when they notice that they have some bloating, is helpful to them. I have read, heard, and tried rubbing peppermint oil or peppermint essential oils on the abdomen to reduce the bloating. That doesn't work for me. it might work for other people, but that one doesn't work for me. The peppermint tea I have had some success with. It just depends on how bad the bloating is. If it's very minor bloating, the peppermint tea will help. If it's a pretty significant moment of bloating, the peppermint tea is not going to help me. And then the last part of peppermint that seems to help quite a few people is peppermint capsules. And so it's basically you want enteric coated capsules, and the reason that we want enteric coated capsules is the enteric coating allows for the peppermint capsule to actually get into the small intestine. It withstands the hydrochloric acid in the stomach, so it doesn't break down and digest in the stomach, because peppermint can actually be pretty harsh to the stomach in a capsule form. So I want it to go into the small intestine so that the capsule will release in there and actually do its work in the small intestine where a lot of the bloating originates. So peppermint, I would definitely try that. I would start with the tea. If the tea is helpful, great, then that's all you really need to do when you have an initial onset of bloating. You can try the capsules. I typically reserve capsules for somebody that has pretty significant or severe bloating. Happens several times a day or every day of the week, and we just can't pinpoint a source of the bloating just yet. I'll go for the enteric coated capsules. That way we can get some relief for them while we try to figure out why they're having this significant bloating. And then if you have peppermint essential oil, you can try that at home, rubbing it on your abdomen. Like I said, it hasn't worked for me, but that doesn't mean it's not going to work for somebody else. The next thing that you can do for onset of bloating is ginger lemon tea. And I'm looking down at my cup because I have some in here right now. I just made some. And I really like it. My husband says it tastes like Theraflu. I don't really think so, but I also enjoy the flavor and aroma of ginger and lemon. And so I make it by, I just put some hot water in my tea kettle and get it steaming. And then I'll put a couple of slices of lemon in the cup, and then I'll just cut up some ginger, just sliver it and stick it in there. And then I'll put a cover over it and let it steep for about 10 minutes. And then I'll start to drink it. You can drain it if you want to. I choose not to drain it, mainly because I'm kind of lazy, and usually I just really want to get in there and start drinking it, but you can absolutely drain it if you'd like. So this happens to be my most favorite go-to remedy. I find that it really helps me a lot just because ginger is an anti-inflammatory, which we learned about last week. And you can check out that blog, which is up on the website as well as last week's video, which you can find on YouTube and then in the video tab of the Facebook page. These guys are being pretty rambunctious tonight. So if you haven't tried ginger lemon tea, I would definitely give it a go. It seems to work best for me out of all the remedies that I have tried. When I have an onset of bloating, this one works the best. And then the last one that you can try is coconut water. And the reason that we put coconut water in there is because coconut is actually pretty high in potassium. And so sometimes when we eat out or we're eating too much packaged or processed foods, all of those are very high in sodium. And we can actually get some bloating by way of water retention from having too many foods that are high in sodium. So the potassium actually signals the kidneys to start releasing some of the sodium through the body. So if you have some water retention, if you have some bloat from excess water, good around the menstrual cycle as well, because when we are menstruating, we're retaining water at that time. And so coconut water, unsweetened coconut water, is going to be high in potassium, so it'll help with some bloating there. As far as long-term bloating, so all of these remedies, the peppermint tea or the enteric coated capsules, the ginger lemon tea or the coconut water, all of those are basically just Band-Aids. You really want to get to the source of what your long-term or what the source of your bloating is. Like we talked about, there's a variety of different reasons, and your bloating is never going to go away until you figure out what the source of that bloating is. And sometimes the bloating will never go away even when you figure out what the source is. For me, I have IBS-D, so a little TMI for you guys, but I have IBS diarrhea, and I actually developed that because of stress. So I developed it when I was in school because I would get up, I would go work out in the morning at 5 a.m., and then I would go to work during the day until 5 at night or 4 at night or 5 at night, battle traffic, come home, and then I would sit on the computer from, 5:36 at night until 10 or 11 at night. I would go to bed for a couple of hours, get up, do the whole shebang all over again. And it was just too much stress on my body. And eventually my body just started to rebel against me. And so I developed IBS-D at that time. Over the years, I have gone into develop gastroparesis as well, which is slow emptying of the stomach. So I absolutely know the source of my bloat. But for me, when I have a flare-up, I can't really control the bloat. All I can do is control what causes the flare-up. So overexertion of emotions. And so, for instance, last week, my son graduated from Marine Corps basic training. And so leading up to that week, I didn't feel stressed. I was very excited to go. I really wanted to see him. But my body was telling me that I was stressed. So I wasn't sleeping very well. I wasn't digesting my foods, so I had a flare-up of my gastroparesis, and then it just seemed like it just kind of all tumbled down. And so now I'm on the back end of it because I'm back. So now I'm kind of battling with some fatigue, which could be from the travel. It could be from a flare-up of my symptoms, but it's kind of like when I have a flare-up, because I know that mine is stress-related. When I have a flare-up, I really just kind of have to baby myself during that time. I have to have a little more time in bed. I need to not put so much pressure on myself to do things and get everything done. I really just need to be lazy during that time so that my body can recover, so that I can relax. Even though I don't necessarily feel stressed, my body is stressed, so I need to let my body calm down. So for me, I can't always control this situation, but I can control how I heal from that situation. But usually the first sign that I notice when I'm going to have a flare-up is I will start to bloat at anything. It's like I look at food and I start to bloat. I don't eat and I start to bloat. It's not fun, but knowing my symptoms helps me figure out, okay, so if I'm starting to bloat, that means my body's stressed, which means that I know what's coming next, and that's not fun. So let me just calm down. Let me add some meditation. Let me run through my checklist. Am I sleeping okay? Am I taking care of myself? Do I have too much on my plate? What am I doing right now that I can change so that I don't exacerbate my condition? So once you kind of figure out the source of your bloat, walking backwards is going to help you figure out how you can handle that. Looks like maybe I have some questions that I missed. No, I didn't. Oh, good evening. Jackie made it. Yay. Excellent. Oh, you're welcome. I love sharing. I don't know that you guys wanted me to share about my IBS, but I did anyway. But I also know I'm not the only one out there suffering from it. So, okay. So, yeah, bloating long-term, you really need to figure out what the source of your bloating is. For most people, it usually is consuming a food that their body doesn't agree with. It creates an inflammatory process in the body. 80% of our immune system lives in our small intestine. And so when we eat a food that the body doesn't agree with, it sees that food as a pathogen, as a bug or a parasite or something that it says, we need to kill this because it's in the body and we don't think it should be here. And so anytime you cause the immune reaction in the body, starting in the small intestine, if you do it on the skin, you'll notice that you're going to get some inflammation on the skin. Same thing happens in the small intestine. And so when we have kind of rampant inflammation in the small intestine and in the body, we have this bloating and this series of symptoms that come with it. Most people that have digestive inflammation and bloating specifically from foods that they're eating that their body doesn't agree with, they will have a whole set of symptoms. The ones that are most common is eczema or dermatitis or itchiness on the skin. They'll notice that they have some bloating, disordered bowel movements, so going too much, too often, too little, or the consistency isn't right, but definitely bloating 1 to 2 hours after meals. So whatever you eat, doesn't matter, whatever time of day, if you get bloated after the meal, that's a good indication that something that you're eating isn't really agreeing with you. Short term though, I definitely recommend that everybody try the ginger lemon tea, try the peppermint tea. Having it after meals is helpful. I find that if I drink ginger lemon tea after meals or in the evening before bed, that really helps with the bloat throughout the night and into the morning. You can try the coconut water. It's not everybody's thing. I don't particularly care for coconut water. My husband really likes it. I just think it's kind of gross, but a lot of people like it. So you can definitely try that if you think that your bloating is because you're eating too much packaged or processed food. But finding the source of your bloating is going to be key to getting your bloating to go away. So I think that's it for tonight. Let me just check my blog. Hi. My body hates sugar. Oh, I have a question. Yay. So my body hates sugar, but I consume it like a pig anyways. Always makes me feel bloated and gross. Well, sugar, I do have a couple of blogs up on that, and I think that we did a live on sugar before maybe. Sugar is actually a really addicting substance, and so it acts on the dopamine receptors in the body. And when we have sugar, we want more sugar, and then we want more sugar. And so typically the only way to get your body to really stop craving sugar is to stop eating sugar. And it is pretty difficult. You can kind of go through two different approaches. You can rip off the Band-Aid and just say, I'm not having any more of that sugar, and go through the detox. Typically lasts about 4 to 5 days. It's definitely not fun. But if you work on slowly reducing your sugar over time, telling yourself, okay, this is how much I'm having today, this is how much I'm going to have tomorrow, you'll still have some withdrawal symptoms, but you won't have them as much or as apparent if you did the rip off the Band-Aid method. But once you stop eating sugar, you notice that it stops controlling you. When we're stressed, we have a spike in cravings. When we're not sleeping as well, we have a spike in cravings, and all of that is because of cortisol. Cortisol causes us to have more cravings because it needs more energy for the body. But definitely pull back, and I would say sit down and develop a plan to pull back on the amount of sugar that you're eating, especially since it makes you bloated. Sugar actually does that to a lot of people. I find that egg whites are pretty offensive to most people. Sugar is pretty offensive. Lactose, but I think most people are aware of that. What's the other common one I see? Egg whites and sugar are probably the biggest ones. Caffeine on occasion, but it's usually egg whites and sugar. I bloat at random times and not always after meals. It can happen on an empty stomach. Thoughts? So that actually sounds like gastroparesis a little bit. Even then, when you haven't had a meal in a while, and sometimes we get some bloating even when we think our stomach is empty, it's typically because the food your stomach won't empty all the way. And so you'll have a little bit of food left in there, and that food will start to kind of become gassy because it's fermenting. And so that'll cause bloating. So we could be hungry, or it could have been 3 hours since our last meal or 4 hours since our last meal, and we notice some bloating. That typically sounds like gastroparesis. It's definitely not fun. Eating more often throughout the day will help, setting a timer to where you're eating every couple of hours. I find that meditation actually helps because we're relaxing and doing some vagus nerve stimulation. So you can try some chanting, should help. You can go on YouTube. There's several different videos on vagus nerve stimulation massages. So it's basically massaging a route on your digestive tract to stimulate the vagus nerve. And then belly breathing. So breathing and taking deep breaths so that we're expanding the belly versus the chest. And so the easiest way to do this is you put a hand here on the belly and you put a hand on the chest. And then when you take a deep breath in, you want to expand the belly so that you are activating the vagus nerve, because the vagus nerve runs through the diaphragm. And so when we activate the vagus nerve, we tend to stimulate digestion. So I would definitely try some belly breathing after meals, or you can try some chanting or meditation after meals, anything that's going to be a little more relaxing, because when we're relaxed, we're digesting, to see if that will help as well. Oh, no problem. Yes, definitely reducing your sugar slowly. And it can be difficult. I watched a really interesting documentary a couple weeks back, and it was all on sugar. And the average American gets about 40 grams of sugar every day just by eating packaged foods. So we're not talking actually opening a bag of sugar and putting it in coffee or tea or something like that. Just by buying, cereals and breads and peanut butters and all these things that people don't necessarily think that sugar is in. But sugar is kind of everywhere. And the recommended daily allowance for women is 25 grams. I always forget what this is because I think it's too high still. I want to say it's 20. Let me look this up real quick because this is going to bother me. Something ridiculous, like maybe it's 20 teaspoons. So it's 25 grams for women. Oh, so I was pretty close, which is 6 teaspoons. So there's 4 grams of sugar in a teaspoon. So it's 25 grams for women, 6 teaspoons, and it's 37 grams for men, which is 9 teaspoons. And I still think that is too much sugar to have in a day. I think that if you want to have a little sugar in your coffee, half teaspoon or something like that, or just get used to drinking it black, drinking herbal teas throughout the day, definitely drinking water. If you're trying to sweeten something for breakfast, use fruit. Berries is your best friend. If you're trying to sweeten something for lunch, again, use fruit. Fruit's your best sweetener. I would stay away from liquid sweeteners like maple syrup, coconut, nectar, agave, those sorts of things. Those are just as bad as high fructose corn syrup in the body. So really any added sugars, but definitely coming up with figuring out how much you're eating now and getting a strategy together to slowly reduce your sugar over time, especially if you know sugar is a source of your bloat. I feel like we jumped from bloating to sugar. We might have. And I'm not going to lie, I like a little sugar every now and again myself. Oh, no problem, Melissa. Let me know if you have any other questions. Hi, Darcy. Okay, so I think that's it for tonight. We went over. If you haven't read the blog, I pinned it. It's all about bloat. Again, I definitely recommend that you find what the source of your bloating is. You're never going to fix the problem until you repair what the underlying cause of the bloat is. Once you fix that, you should see a substantial reduction in your bloat. In the meantime, until you're trying to fix that or find what the underlying source is, definitely look at the 4 things that we talked about, which was continuing to eat foods our body doesn't agree with, gastrointestinal issues such as IBS, IBD, gastroparesis, which is slow emptying of the stomach, or what was the last one? What was it? Displaced or inadequate microbes. That's an important one. I can't believe I forgot I wrote that down. So find the underlying cause. While you're working on finding what the underlying cause of your bloating is, definitely employ some peppermint tea or some enteric coated capsules. Definitely try the lemon ginger tea. It's not that strong. The longer you let it steep, the stronger it's going to get. If you feel like it's too strong, you can back off on the amounts that you're putting in or the length of time that you're letting it steep. But try it after your meals to see how that helps with bloating, but still continue to figure out what the underlying source of your bloating is, because if you don't fix it, it's never going to get better. And that is it for tonight, kiddies. Thanks for joining me. Next week, we are chatting about, it is the top 5 puzzle pieces to weight loss. So basically the things that most people don't think about, it's not necessarily calories out versus calories in. It's a whole slew of reasons that our body just wants to hang on to the weight. And so next week, we're going to break all those down and figure out the things that you can do to start stimulating some weight loss. See you next week, guys. Bye.